tomorrow, and and I would like to thank all the brave students who are about to tell you stories that are going to knock your socks off. I told the first half of their stories last Friday, and they were amazing. So we're all looking forward to hearing the second half. And without any further gibberish from me, I'm going to turn it over to our MC for the night, Heather Gregory. Heather?
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. So let's just start by introducing the judges. Ross McKay, let's give a wave to the people here. So Ross is Dean of Arts and Humanities. He is also a professor of English Lit. His specialties are 18th century satire, Swift, etc. Romantics, especially Blake. 19th century British Lit, history and literature, narrative discourse, wow, etc., etc. In addition to steering the ship of arts and humanities at BIU, he's developing a book-length study of Blake's work and revising a manuscript called Rational Fiction, Historical Representations in Scott and Hogg. All right, Andrew Gray, let's give a wave. Woo! Andrew is the founder and coordinator of Optional Residency MFA in Creative Writing at UBC. His stories and poetry have appeared in numerous literary magazines. He was nominated for the National Magazine Award for Fiction in 2000 and has twice been shortlisted for the CBC Saturday Night Literary Award. He was a finalist for the 2000 Journey Prize for his short story Heart of the Land, and his first collection of short fiction, Small Accidents, was shortlisted for the Ethel Wilson Award in BC and an IPBY Independent Publishers Award in the US. He has 2 new novels in the works. Andrew. Finally, last but not least, obviously, Chevy Stevens. Chevy is the New York Times bestseller author of 4 novels, with a 5th, Those Girls, to be published next year. Her first novel, Still Missing, won the International Thriller Award for Best First Novel. Chevy's books have been optioned for movies and are published in more than 30 countries. Chevy lives with her family in Nanaimo, and her latest novel is That Night. All right, so let's get on to the stories. First of all, I'd like to call up Robert Ferguson. Robert is 2-time winner of the Story Slam, defending champ for this evening. So help me to welcome Robert. You're welcome.
Here's a mind-expanding thought for you. Before your parents were your parents, they weren't parents, right? They had their own dreams and aspirations, and they were different people, their own people, right? And that just blows my mind, right? Because it's weird to think of your parents as people instead of just the goofy people that they are. You know, we are just fragments of the chapter in the book that is our parents' lives. You know, my dad and I aren't that close, you know, and I got a phone call from my dad last year, and that just totally weirded me out because my dad never phones me. You know, a phone conversation with my dad looks like my mom phoning me. And after she's asked me about my day and she's gleaned any information that she can from me, she tells me everything she's eaten that day in great detail. And afterwards she thrusts the phone reluctantly into my dad's hand and he says, "How are you?" "I'm good, Dad." "Good, good, that's good, good." "Do you want to speak to your mom?" "Yeah, cool, bye." And that's it. It doesn't mean my dad, is a bad dad. When I was a little kid and I was being bullied, my dad cleared out his lunch schedule, all his patience for the afternoon, so he could come to my school and have lunch with me, so I wouldn't have to eat lunch by myself. Every time a small child comes into my dad's office, he'll crouch down and say, "Hi, my name's Dr. Ferguson, what's yours?" And they'll look at him and go, "Sarah." He'll say, "Hi, Sarah. How old are you?" "Well, I'm 3. "Well, next year, are you going to be expensive?" My dad is so embarrassing that he can melt my face like I'm staring into the Ark of the Covenant. He has this gear, and he calls it his technical gear. And it's this like Tilly hat that like the Crocodile Hunter Dundee wears. And he has this button-up shirt that's short sleeve and these khaki pants that he wears just to show off his calves, and he struts around. And we call it the zookeeper's outfit because when we were in the Edmonton Zoo, people asked him questions about the animals. And my dad knew all the questions to the animals because my dad is one part Bill Nye the Science Guy, one part Holmes on Holmes. And when I got that phone call from my dad, he said, "How are you? How was your day?" And I said, "It was really good, Dad. What's wrong?" He says, "I have some bad news. Remember when I had that operation and I had the tumors in my thyroid and we had to take the thyroid out? They think I've had a stroke on the operating table. And nothing makes you doubt your relationship with a parent when they say, 'I had a stroke on the operating table.'" My mind went back to when I was 13 and my dad bounded into my room with this look on his eyes and he says, "It's time. We're going hiking." And he took me and we went to Edmonton to the mecca of all hiking stores, right? Mountain Equipment Co-op. And it was weird to see my dad in his element because he had a smile and emotion. And my dad just doesn't do that. There's a reason why we call him Mr. Spock. And he was running around the store like a ferret on meth. And it wasn't long before we had our backpacks and new hiking shoes and a tent that they use at the base camp of Mount Everest and hiking food and my own tactical gear. These purple pants that zipped in the shorts with a shirt that looked like Barney the dinosaur vomited on it. And I looked like my dad, and it was disheartening. The first hike we went on to was called the Berg Lake Trail in Mount Robson. And it's 24 kilometers, and we did it in 3 days. And my dad said, "We have to test out your pack." So we put 30 pounds in my backpack, and I'm 13 pounds. And he put the backpack on, and I started to lean back, and he went to catch me, but he missed me, but he was able to swat me away from the stairs, so I just lay there like a turtle with my arms and legs kicking in the air, And when we finally got to Berg Lake, we met up with the group we went with, and we started hiking. And the first day, we were just going to the Valley of 1,000 Falls, and on the way there, something weird happened. My dad and I started talking, and he told me of stories about him and his dad when they were hiking. He told me of science and this new theory called the multiverse that just totally destroys physics. And it blew my mind because I was starting to see a little bit who my dad was underneath the surface. And I was getting tired for like the 5th hour of hiking. And I started to lag behind the group. My dad said, "Well, you can stay here with me, but you have to take on my special job." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Bear bait." And I was at the front of the group for the rest of the hike. And when we finally got to the Valley of 1,000 Falls, there was these 3 big waterfalls that made a circular rainbow. And I said, "We're not hiking up there, are we?" My dad said, "No, that's too dangerous. We're going there." And I looked up, and our trail went up into the mountains. Now, the trail of a Valley of 1,000 Falls has like a 24,000 vertical incline after 3 kilometers. And I hiked that shit at 13. with the 24-pound pack, and the whole way my dad's like, this is a good beginner's hike. This is a really good beginner's hike. And the whole way there, the other hikers were bugging my dad and I for how much we bought, because they had just Canadian Tire tents, and we had the huge, big fancy tent. And when we woke up that morning, the tent was black, and it snowed about that much. And we got to look nice and warm as the other hikers were brushing out their clothes from the wet snow. And the German pastor that stayed with us, I have never seen just a more grateful German in my life. And as my dad and I, we stared again along the glacier lake, still as glass. We had some of the best lemonade I've ever had in my life. And they had these marmots, these kind of it's like a really big ferret, pretty much. And my dad showed me how to pet one of them, and it was just the most amazing experience. And when we got back to the car on the last day, my dad said something he's only said twice in my lifetime. And that's, "I'm proud of you." The second time he said it is when I graduated, and that messed me up for 3 days. And my dad and I have seen amazing things. I have been this far away from an elk. I have seen a mama bear with her cubs. I have seen the sun just ignite on still glass lakes. And I got to see these beautiful things because of my father. My dad still doesn't call me, but I call my dad, every day now. And I try to have conversations, and it's not just hiking, and today I can say I'm proud of my dad, and I love you, Dad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. That was very touching. I forgot to mention in my intro, stories are 10 minutes each, and these are true stories. So think about that while you're listening. So next up is Emily Reiki. Emily moved to the island 1 year ago from Ontario. She's in the creative writing program at VIU and is an aspiring novelist. So welcome, Emily.
So I think I should prelude my story a little bit by telling you about my family. My parents are very similar to a lot of people's parents, and I think everyone will recognize the trope when I say, mom and dad are business people or lawyers, so you're going to be a business person or a lawyer. Or mom and dad went to Yale, so that's where you're going to go to school. My parents aren't business people, and they're not lawyers, and they definitely didn't go to Yale. My father is a musician, and my mother is a painter. So there was this definite underlying pressure that never got talked about when I was growing up, that me and my brothers would become artists. And this was never a problem for me because art was very much encouraged in a very positive way in my family. So I wanted to become an artist. The problem was that I didn't know what kind of art was going to be mine, what my niche was going to be. So I grew up watching my two older brothers fall into their niches really, really easily. My eldest brother is a painter, my other brother is a musician, and they are astronomically good in their fields. They've exceeded my parents' expectations by enormous amounts, and my parents love to brag about them. So I wanted to be bragged about. So I tried out all my kinds of arts, and I finally stumbled upon musical theater when I was about 11. My grandmother took me to see Les Mis, and something about the costumes and the lighting and the singing and be able to become somebody that you weren't every day was really this very powerful siren song to me. So I decided from that moment on I was going to become the next Broadway star. And so I dedicated myself to this, and my parents were really good about supporting me. So I got put into singing lessons and got to go to Shakespeare camp in the summers, and got driven to and from auditions and rehearsals for every musical theater thing that was in my little tiny town. So for all my teenage years, this was entirely what I identified as, was that musical theater kid, which my parents thought was kind of dorky, but they were into it anyway, because at least it was art. So when the time came to go to university, I decided I was only going to apply to art schools. So I finally went to York University, was the one I got accepted in, which isn't known as an art school, but it's got a good arts program. And so the way the theater program works at York is that there's about 100 people in it at first, and you're not an actor, and you're not a director, you're not a manager. At first, you're just a theater person, and you learn everything. And at the end of the first year, you audition again to get into acting or directing or whatever it is you want to do. And so I, like everybody else in the theater program, wanted to be an actor. Unfortunately, the problem was that there are only 9 spots in the acting conservatory at York, so the competition was pretty heavy. But I, coming from a little tiny town, being a big fish in a little pond, thought, got this in the bag. It's totally going to be easy. I'm going to become the next Broadway star. So I get there, and I don't know if you've spent a lot of time with theater people, but they're insane. They sing with no reason. They wear crazy clothes. They're very, very loud. And I am not those things. And so coming to this school, I found very quickly that I had become this like shy, meek person. And that was coming out in a lot of my classes. So in my acting classes specifically, I found myself kind of like being filtered down to the bottom, in that my monologues came out very stumbled, and that my scenes came out, I screwed them up some way or another. And everybody kind of did this like shifty-eyed thing when we got to pick scene partners, and I got like picked last in gym kind of situation going on. So that felt great. So at the end of the first term, after I like picked my role and become this person, we got our grades back, and my grades very strongly reflected what had happened. My best marks were in English and history, and I was getting A's and felt really good about that, but my worst mark was in acting, in which I had a C+, which was like the bare minimum to get into the next semester. So it broke my heart a little bit, but I felt like, it's the first university thing, I'm away from home, there are reasons. So at the beginning of the second semester, the professor started putting on the pressure really, really hard to get your monologues ready for the secondary audition. And they were very fond of telling us that 10% of the program was going to get cut altogether. Of the 100 of us, only 90 of us got into the next year, and everybody else had to, they still got to go to York, but they couldn't be theater people anymore. And so everybody was like really crazy about finding their monologues, and so I was looking through all the ones that I had studied and all the scenes that I'd done, and nothing seemed quite right. So I felt, I'll figure it out later. I'll just sweep it under the rug and get really good at my acting lessons while everybody else is distracted. So time went on like that, and I found myself dropping all my extracurricular classes so that I could focus on this acting thing. And still I wasn't getting any better, and it felt very strange because in my tiny little town, I had been one of the kids who were so enthusiastic, and that meant that I was one of the best. And it suddenly turned out in this big city where everybody was the most enthusiastic kid, that no longer meant I was the best. So at the end of the semester, and everybody had been preparing their monologues for months and months, I suddenly decided very quickly that I wasn't going to do the audition, because this deep, dark part of my heart knew I was not one of the 9 best actors in the school, and so I probably was not going to get into the conservatory. And so this decision was made before I even realized I was making it, that I had quit on myself, on this thing that I had been doing for the past 10 years of my life, which, young as I am, is the majority of my life. And so that was very strange, and so I started telling my family. I didn't want to tell them the truth, so I told them that, I didn't really feel like acting. It's not what I thought it was going to be, and it's too elite, it's too prestigious, it's too, people just pick who they pick. They don't pick anyone who's talented, just like, if you're the son of a director, do you get it? And so I switched into the English program because I knew it was what I was good at. And so for the next 3 years, I did English. And I wasn't very passionate about it, but at least I did well because I knew how to write an essay. And kind of things spiraled down from there because I had been taught my whole life that the only worthwhile thing is to create art. And I was no longer creating art, and this was very much reflected in my parents' reactions to my change. They didn't really say anything. They obviously didn't believe me, but they didn't say anything about my switch. They just stopped bragging about me to their friends. So they would talk about my two older brothers having rearranged symphonies and painting 8-foot murals and things, and then they would say, well, Emily's doing her thing, which was kind of hard to hear. Anyway, so I did my 3 years of English, and I felt like I was withering in a way, because I wasn't creating anything, which, was the worthwhile thing in my life. So I had my midlife crisis a little early. So at the end of my 3rd year, I stopped going to class. I stopped talking to my friends. I stopped going outside because things were just getting really bad for me. I decided maybe it's school that's not my thing. So I decided to quit. I didn't do my final exams, I didn't do my final papers. I just decided, to hell with it, I'll pick something else. And I got a call from my brother a couple nights before I was prepared to leave for my parents' house. And I think my mom had told him what I was doing, that I was doing really poorly. And he told me, Emily, I'm out in BC right now. He was learning how to build guitars. And he said, maybe what you need is a grand adventure. You can come visit me, I'll show you the island, I'll give you this big thing, this big momentous thing that can give you direction in your life. And I was very pessimistic about this. I said, I'm not doing anything here, what makes you think I'll do anything there? And I hung up on him, which was very rude, but he forgave me. And while I was thinking about this conversation, I was kind of coming to the realization that I was so frustrated with life because I wasn't doing anything that I felt was worthwhile. And I was staring at my bookshelf, which was across the room from me. And on my bookshelf were all the books that I had to read for school, and all my favorite books, and all the books that I had planned to read. And the bottom shelf had no books on it because it was entirely full of journals. Journals that I'd written through my school years. And they were all full of mostly my thoughts about my days and all the food that I eat. But they were also full of poetry and short stories and sentences that I thought were worth noting. And this strange realization dawned on me that seemed so obvious in retrospect, but at the time it kind of it was a weird click that writing is art too. Because I'd been taught for so long that art meant being praised, and that if you were creating art, it meant the aftermath was great. And you got your clippings from the newspaper cut out, and your parents would brag about you to your friends and bring you flowers after your play. And no one had ever given me anything for writing, but it's because I hadn't shown my writing to anybody. It was just something I did for me. It was something I did to keep my sanity and to just feel like I was doing something and moving along in my life is why I wrote. So when I came to the island, like my brother suggested, I ended up staying, and I started taking a couple of creative writing classes just to see what it was about because I wasn't doing anything. I was working at Sears. And so I was taking these creative writing classes, and suddenly it turned into a full schedule of writing. And I started feeling better and better and better about myself. And I think that's because this part of myself that said, art is all that is life, and you need to be creating art. It was being nourished in a way that wasn't egocentric. It wasn't because somebody was praising me for what I was doing. It was just because I was doing something for the sake of it. I was doing it for myself. And I think this big momentous realization was ultimately that I could, without any dishonesty or shame, finally call myself an artist. And that meant something. So thank you.
Thanks, Emily. So next up is Jessie Zay. Jessie is from Protection Island and currently in her second year of the VIU Creative Writing Program. As a Chinese immigrant, Jessie's life is changing and her story is about parenting.
I'm a mother. I have a 21-year-old daughter. When the nurse brought my new baby to my bed, I told me that she was a girl. I cried. It's not because I was emotionally celebrating a new life. It was because I wanted a son to please my husband and his family. Being a new mom was a challenge. I would sit up in the midnight and yell out, "Shut up, you! I have to go to work and I need sleep." Apparently, my baby never got the message. She only stopped when I rocked her in my arms and paced around in my pajamas. When she was 3 years old, I divorced, became a single mother, I realized my husband was handsome, but not a good husband. Like many Chinese parents, I had a great expectation for my daughter. I wished her to be extraordinary. My dictionary had only one definition about extraordinary. Go to the best prestigious university and make tons of money. Then she'll have happiness. So when she in grade 4, I made some plan. I said, go to Harvard. If anyone asks you, you just tell them, where you want to go to university? Harvard. I thought if she could repeat her goal often enough, she would achieve it. Here is one thing I just forgot. When she was 3 years old, I made up a story. I said, was a place for mixing children up from different families. On a particular day, the children stand on one side, the parents stand on the other. Only smart kids would be picked. So you have to be smart, otherwise I won't pick you, but other kids. It was not difficult to scare a 3-year-old mom. In 2005, I sent her to a private international school in Shanghai. Eventually, I couldn't handle the cost. Her stepfather was very generous. He sent money from Vancouver for her schooling. I have thought, well, this daughter, after all, is going to go to Harvard. That's worth. She did very well in CY International School. She joined the student union, lived in the dormitory, became the student union president. I remember I just couldn't help to show off the words, the marks, and the medals to my relatives, friends, and co-workers. I thought she was a star, and I imagined she's going to be successful. One time, I made a speech in a parents' meeting and to talk about how I educated my daughter at home. After I moved to Canada, I sent her to Richmond Secondary School because there was an IB program, International Baccalaureate, which sounded extraordinary. I had thought she would be accepted easily, but I forgot how difficult it would be if English wasn't her first language. So, because the language barrier, she eventually couldn't go into IB program. Instead, she had to continue her grade 11. She couldn't graduate at the same time as her peer in China because she had to make up English courses. The culture shock. The difficulty of language, she often locked her in her home, in her room. I was so worried about her. And my husband and I wondered if we brought her to Canada is right choice since she had been doing very well in Shanghai. One evening, I carefully suggested, I said, maybe you should go see a counselor because she looks so depressed. And she just shut the door. You know, she's 18, and at that time she already one big size bigger than me. So that just bang, and at that time I didn't realize that I need, as a parent, I need to go to school, go to a parenting school or go to see a counselor, get some help. No, I was trying to create a perfect student and fulfill my desire. My husband, a Canadian man, born in Kingston, raised in Montreal, told me that when he was hesitating for choosing his education, his father said, think of what are you happy to do when you get up every morning, go in that direction. I learned parents do not push their kids in Canada. Gradually, I realized that I was imposed my dreams on my daughter. I had a conversation with her later and said, I'm so sorry, my attitude changed. Now my mind opened, I see more things now. In 2013, she had her first job at the Denny pub, Nanaimo. She was the best employee at that season. She got a scholarship from UVic, and now she's in second year of commerce. Last summer, she landed a job as second cook in the dining room at Butchart Garden, Victoria. She told me that she will be able to pay her tuition for the coming year. She didn't go to Harvard like I had hoped. But she found her happiness, found her place, and she's on the way to fulfillment. Recently, she told me, she said, Mom, I'm really lucky to be here. And I'm inspired today, in my class, who come? The founder of Yahoo. As a mother, I am thrilled. There is something bigger than go to prestigious university. There is a little girl who has become an independent woman, who knows what she wants to be. I am thrilled. I thought, if parents like me can change themselves, there would be more happier young people. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessie. That was great. So next up, we have Colin Duff. Colin is going into the biomedical engineering field and is an experienced guitarist. He prefers to be mysterious, so that's all we're saying.
Thanks, guys. If I could ask one thing of everyone here, is at the end of the segment, instead of clapping, I just get your best fake sneeze. Just saying, I'll enjoy it, you'll enjoy it, everyone's gonna have a good time. Okay, so the story takes place, I guess, about 5 years ago. I'm sitting in my living room at home, having a fun time, my roommate brings home this game. I'm pretty sure most people in here played Rock Band. You got your little fake guitar, fake drum set, and you were the rock star of the evening, right? Now, being a guitar player myself, I'm sitting there, you know, tuning this thing up, playing my little jam. My roommate's over there, Gene Simmons the place up. I'm just like, looking at him like, oh man, like, you don't even know how hard that is to do. Totally, I'm through with this right off the bat. But after seeing him do it a couple times, I came around. Started jamming on this thing, loved it. Oh my God, you wanna go home and feel like a rock star? You pull this thing, dust it off, start playing. 5 minutes later, you're gonna look at your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever and be like, yeah, I'm a rock star, it's go time. You can't even deny this. Look at these tasty licks right here. All right, so I get into it. I'm like, all right, done. Start playing. And there's this one downloadable song that we start going on called Shoot by Darkest of the Hillside Thickets. If you guys ever hear this, it's a Cthulhu H.P. Lovecraft cover band. All they do is like sci-fi, alternate dimensions, time travel, ancient gods from beyond the depths of space and the ocean, right? And I'm loving this song. I'm like, oh man, this band's awesome. I look over and I'm like, okay, enough of this video game stuff. Do you want to go meet these guys? And he's like, that's not how life works. You don't just decide, I'm gonna go hang out with this band I heard once. And I'm like, dude, that's how my life works, like, whatever. So I look them up, and they're coming to this place called Ryder Lake, which, if anyone knows, it's by Chilliwack, up on a mountain. Like, you can look at it on a map, there's like roads for the highway, then one that just twists up a mountain and disappears. So I'm like, yeah, I can do it. Make a couple phone calls, get us some rides, man. We'll go there, no problem. He's like, I'm like, I'll tell you what, I don't got a lot of cash, so if I work some magic, we get to hang out with the band, have a good time, you know, go have a little smoke sesh, a couple drinks with them, you pay my way. And he's like, I'm not sure about this. I'm like, tell you what, double or nothing. How about that? You can't lose. He's like, all right, deal. You know, because you think about it, like a band that's on a video game is gonna be like 10,000 people there, right? It's like some AC/DC band. You're like, I'm not gonna get backstage. Some muscle-bound guy's gonna stop me and be like, where's your VIP pass? I'm gonna be like, in the bathroom? So, go online, check it out, make some phone calls. The day comes. Hop on the ferry. Buddy of mine picks us up on the other side, takes us to Yarrow. Now, Yarrow is a one-street town that is all cornfield. And if anyone's ever seen Children of the Corn, that is where it happened. If you make a wrong turn in there, you'll see an orphan standing in the field holding a sickle. Like, I'm not kidding you, like, oh. So, I tell him where it is, Ryder Lake, and he's like, are you guys insane? Like, what? It's all dirt roads and, like, hicks up there. Like, if you go up there, just tell everyone you love Dukes of Hazzard. You'll be fine. So, like, all right. We start up there. The sun goes down, and all you see is darkness and 100-foot tall trees all around you. It's like you're driving up there, and you're like, this is where I die. Oh shit, there was Leatherface. Holy smokes, okay, this is it, eh? So we get up there to where this place is happening, and instantly me and my friend look at each other and we're like, this can't be right. This old town hall looks like it once was a church, but they've since then aged it and half burnt it. And there's like 5 bikers standing out front. And I'm like, this is an HA rally. This is not what I signed on for at all. But I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's just go in, have a good time, see how it goes. So we go in, sure enough, there's the band sitting at a table trying to sell some merchandise. There's some chicks selling drinks. Like, this is low key, like 30 people showed up. And instantly I'm like, sit down with these guys. I'm like, dude, we came from Nanaimo to see you? And they're like, no, we're like a garage band from Vancouver. Why would you guys do that? We're like, dude, we love that song. You guys are awesome with your squid costumes and like your music. Like, oh man, going down to Dunwich, awesome song. You guys are great. So we hang out, have some beers. They get their costumes on, start playing. Great song. If you guys look them up later, you're gonna love it. So me and my friend there are the only two moshing to this. Everyone else is just eyeballing us hard. And I'm like, oh geez, we forgot the Confederate flags. Oh, we're going down. They're gonna take us out back and it's gonna be a bad time. So we end up after the show, the main, like it was Anvil Reunite tour or whatever, gets on stage. We're like, oh, we're not here for this. Like, we're out. So I'm looking around. Okay, we go outside. There's a payphone. I'm like, oh, what's the taxi number here? Okay, run back inside. Go up to the girl working the liquor booth. Music is blaring. I'm like, I need a number of taxi. And she's like, what the hell is this guy doing? I'm like, give me a number. And she's like, all right. Writes it down, gives me a wink. I go outside. I'm like, all right, cool, let's get out of here. Phone it up. It's her freaking answer machine. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, now you give me a phone call. Oh, geez, like, they don't need this now. I need to get out of here. So I'm like, okay, in a brash decision. Look out on the horizon, I see lights. I know I'm up a mountain, and I'm like, okay, man, let's do it. There's lights in the distance. I'm not sure where we are, but when we get there, we'll find a way home. It's all good. And he agrees. So we start down this black mountain of nothing but dirt roads, blind corners, and the wolves you hear in the woods. And I'm pretty sure at one point I'll just see some machete-wielding freak, and I'll be like, I expected this on the way in. I'm not too upset with it. All right, you know, just make it quick, one clean slice like in the movies. I will be your camp leader for the night. So we start down, and we're going for about an hour, and we left the place at midnight. And we get maybe like 2/3 down this mountain. This van pulls up in front of me. Door slides open, and all I hear is, "You are the dumbest islanders I have ever seen." And I'm like, who the hell is this? I'm looking, it's the band. They're like, where the hell are you guys even going? And I'm like, I don't know, towards those lights over there? They're like, what the? This is classic Islanders shit. You guys think you can just walk everywhere? Like you're eventually gonna be fine when you get there? Get in the freaking van. So we hop in, and we fly back up to the town hall. We get back and I check the time. You guys aren't gonna believe this, but guess what time it is? It's midnight. This entire hour we walked down this mountain has disappeared in time as daylight savings has taken that hour away from us. That hour is gone forever. Like all clocks in history just turned our back and was like, no, you guys don't deserve that. You made a dumb Islander decision. No, it's not gonna get recorded. So we started bombing around with the band members. Take them to like Vancouver, dropped off a couple of them, and then the guitarist is like, all right, let's have some fun. Drives back to where he picks us up. He's like, when you get to the end of this road, there's a fork in it. Let's go down there. Get down to this fork. He's like, which way would you guys go? I'm like, oh, towards the lights, of course. That's where the city is. He's like, that's towards the interior. That would have taken you 3 days to get down that road. I'm like, oh, this is not the island at all. This is the mainland. I see. So there's no gas station. He's like, no, you're dumb. You're a dumb person. Now we're going to Yarrow where you guys are staying, right? I'm like, yeah, let's go there. So me and my friend end up in Yarrow, calling up my buddy. I'm like, I can't work my phone. I'm kind of drunk. Can you do it? So he takes my phone, phones up my friend. He's like, I'm here in Yarrow with your friends and they don't know where you live. Can you come get them? My buddy wakes up, he's already asleep. Gets up, he's like, well, yeah, sure, whatever. Drops us off, and about 2 minutes later, on this one road street, I see this truck swerve, screech, and just burn rubber up to us. And he's like, just get in the back seat. The kids are awake, I hate you guys. We're going to my house. So we hop in, just tear off. End up falling asleep on the floor somewhere. In the morning, I wake up to a kid's foot on my face, and what I think is Lego stuck to the side of it. As I wake up and I'm like, oh geez. Look at my friend, I'm like, real life has awoken us, my friend. This is no longer fantasy land, this is real life. So we get up, head to the nearest Greyhound station, get a ride back into Vancouver, and end up meeting up with another friend of mine to get a ride to the ferry. So of course, all right, boom, bombing off towards the ferry. And I realized, like, we're not in Horseshoe Bay. This is Delta. This is the wrong ferry. She's like, all right, too bad. Sorry, I gotta go, guys. Drops us off. I'm like, damn it. Why didn't we specify? All right, I mean, like, you guys have always been there, right? Obviously, some of you have been like, yeah, just take me to the ferry, it'll be all good, and you wind up there and you're like, oh, it would have been a 10-minute trip to Horseshoe. But yeah, hopped on the ferry, came on back, had a great time, and that's the end of my story. But I think the moral here is that don't let people live in this video game world where things and adventures become unattainable. They have to go out there, get it, seize the day. That's it. That's the story.
Thanks, Colin. That was kind of terrifying for a moment there. I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. So get your drinks, do your thing, get all your talks out. When we come back, we're going to have Jessica Keys.
So that's really close. I don't know how many of you guys have had moussaka before or how many of you have made it, but for those of you who don't know, it's basically like this Mediterranean casserole that's really popular in Greek restaurants. I recommend everyone tries it. Maybe not try making it though. I hope I don't scare you off that too much with this. So it's basically layers of vegetables, ground beef, and a top layer of bechamel. And once you know what's in it, the next thing you need to know is it takes a long frickin' time to make. And every recipe I found online has said an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, and I really, really doubt those statistics because I think it's yet to take me less than 3. So the first time I made it was not last summer, but the summer before, and I'd been with my then boyfriend for about 2 years. And I guess you could say we're on the rocks. The truth of it was I was just never going to be that soft-spoken, like domestic goddess that you wanted to come home to after a long day of work. And that's not to say I didn't make dinner a lot, but we had an awful lot of stir fry. And he admitted to me one day that they actually had this rating system at work of all of their girlfriends. And I don't know if it was on a 1 to 10 system, I never really asked. But he admitted to me one day during a fight that I fell pretty close to the bottom. And it was because, oh yeah, that's pretty bad. But I refused to wake up at 6 a.m. to make his lunch or do his laundry or any of that stuff. And at the time I was like, yo dude, I did not sign up to be your mother, like that's fine. But it kept coming up every fight we have, like, you know, it'd be really, really nice to come home to this like really nice home cooked meal when I got off work. And you know, I was having this conversation with someone the other night. When someone has these expectations of you to be nice to them, it makes you just dig in your heels and be like, hell no, I'm not doing that. But I guess eventually it just kind of wore down on me. Apparently guilt tripping works on me pretty well. But eventually I was just like, you know, I really think I'm a nicer girlfriend than this. Like I'm not a 2 on the 1 to 10 scale. Maybe I should do something nice for him. And I think we've all been in that situation where you end up kind of editing yourself in a relationship. And nobody ever goes into it like, yeah, I'm gonna be that girl. And I don't know why I say it like that. I don't know why girls are obsessed with saying, I'm not that girl. Like, look at the title of Lena Dunham's book. There's nothing wrong with being a woman. There's nothing wrong with being that girl. But a lot of us get into this situation in a relationship where really subtly and almost subconsciously, you end up kind of mirroring this person that you think that the person that you care about wants you to be. And it's not because there's anything wrong with the person you're with, but you know, you like them and you want them to like you back. So it kind of is this like really quiet process that you're not necessarily totally like into at the time, but it just kind of happens. And maybe the reason we're in this so-called rough patch was I was really not happy with my surroundings. I don't know any 21-year-old that's like, I'm gonna move to Port Alberni and be a housewife in a double wide trailer. But there I was living in, yes, a double wide trailer, and it was pretty close to Sprout Lake, which like when my friends would be like, oh, where are you living? And I'm like, oh, I live on Sprout Lake, which is totally a lie. It was like 10 minutes away. But our kitchen was mustard yellow, and the rest of the house was varying shades of wood laminate. And in our bedroom alone, there was like 7 different kinds. And my friends started referring to this as 50 shades of wood grain. And they thought it was really, really funny, but I lived there, so it wasn't. And at the time, time, we ended up relocating because the boyfriend, he was a forest firefighter, so he had to live within 15 minutes of the fire base. And at first I was like, oh, you know, I'm just a bartender, I'm paying for school this way, it's not a big deal. I'll get a new job in Port Alberni. But my boss in Qualicum offered me a raise and it was gonna cover my travel time and my costs, so I'm gonna commute for the summer. And you know, the drive from Port Alberni to Qualicum is actually kind of pretty. You're going over the hump, you see the lake, it's pretty nice. But when you're driving home at 2 a.m. and you spent 10 hours basically like being a drunk wrangler, like it's kind of stressful, like going over the hump on the way home. So I wasn't entirely happy. But I kind of like, I steeled myself for this, like, I'm gonna be a good girlfriend this summer. God damn it, I am going to crawl up the ranks. Like, I'm probably not gonna be the 10, like I'm not actually a housewife, but like, you know, I feel like I'm a solid 7 here. So I'm gonna make moussaka. And when I was living in Port Alberni, I called it acclimatizing to my surroundings, and the reality was I just had a fully stocked liquor cabinet at all times. And I started doing this thing where you kind of like, you pick your recipes based on their liquor content. And I mean, like, what sounds better, orange zest panna cotta or amaretto and orange zest panna cotta? Like, I feel like I could rest my case there, but the lights haven't come on yet, so I'm just gonna keep going for a minute. So this boyfriend, he'd been away on a fire for about 2 weeks. He was in rural Quebec. We got to talk via satellite phone for approximately 8 minutes. This entire 2 weeks he was gone. And it has this lag, so you just kind of end up like talking over each other for 10 seconds, and then you both stop for 10 seconds and do it all over again, and it's super annoying. And while he was gone, I think I'd eaten his entire box of Pizza Pockets. And we were at that point in the relationship where like, this was like, knockout, drag out fight. Like Pizza Pockets were a big contentious issue for us. It's like, if you leave your straightener on the counter, like this is a big deal. You don't fight about the important things anymore, it's just the annoying household stuff that like, it's hard to get over. So I'm just like, I'm gonna make this big dinner, he's gonna get home at 7 p.m. and he's just gonna be floored by this. And I don't know how many of you guys have cooked with eggplant before, but the first thing you need to know about cooking with eggplant is after you peel it and slice it, you have to salt it. And that makes it let go of all the excess liquid and that really awful bitter taste it can get. And the first time I cooked with eggplant, I didn't know this, and I was about 18 and I made eggplant parmesan for the first time, and I feel really, really sorry for my dinner guests. And the reason I tell you this is to try and kind of like prove that I knew what I was doing a little bit this time. And I had a game plan, and it really started off well. And unfortunately, recipes like relationships don't often turn out like you plan them to. But this step 1 was going really, really well. I'd salted the eggplant, I bucked up a zucchini, peeled and boiled some potatoes, and then you pan fry both sides of them, and that's your bottom layer of this casserole. You layer in some cheese, because why wouldn't you? And step 2 doesn't seem that much more complicated. You're basically sauteing some ground beef, some onions and some garlic, throw in some spices like some nutmeg, some cinnamon, some cumin if you're feeling super, super adventurous. And then you add in a whole egg, and you're gonna add in some tomato sauce and a liberal amount of red wine, hence why I chose this recipe. And this is kind of when everything started to go sideways. Because if anyone's ever cooked anything that asks for something to reduce, it never happens as quickly as you think it's going to. It's kind of like your homework, that you're like, oh, this will take me an hour, and then you're crying at 4 a.m. as it's due that day. And the second thing that went wrong was this recipe took about 1/3 of a bottle of wine, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna like de-stress, I'm gonna drink the rest of this. Don't want this to go bad. And so this recipe is not reducing like I want it to, and for some reason this is kind of when I start stressing out a little bit. I'm not quite sure why I put so much pressure on this one dinner, but I guess just this entire summer feeling like I wasn't enough, you know, I'm a number 2 on the girlfriend scale. And this was my moment. And I read this piece pretty recently. It's by Warsan Shire, and it's called For Women Who Are Difficult to Love. And there's this line from it that really stood out to me, and it's, you can't make homes out of human beings. And I realize now that that's entirely what I was trying to do, because geographically and emotionally, I was not happy where I was. But I was trying to prove that this moving to Port Alberni was worth it. So I was damned if I was gonna let this, if I was gonna lose it over making dinner. And So eventually the sauce reduces, and the second thing goes wrong with this recipe, and that for all of my attempts to follow this recipe to the letter, and that was including making my pan was exactly the right dimensions, my ingredient to pan ratio was off pretty significantly. So I call my friend, she's about 10 minutes away, and I think she noticed this like note of desperation in my voice because I swear she showed up within 2 minutes. I'm not sure if she just like knew this was gonna happen, like if it was this like Jessica Spidey sense that was going off in her brain, but she was there. And the first thing that she says when she walks into my house is, "What the hell happened in here?" And I kind of look around, there's ingredients on every counter, like every space in our entire kitchen, including our dining room table. And there's sauce on the fridge, and there's sauce on me, like I'm pretty sure I looked like I murdered someone. And I just like looked at her and I was just like, dude, like you have to stay, you have to help me with this. I was begging, like very hopefully here. And she'd known me for about 10 years, so she knew better than to like buy into this. She's like, no, dude, like this is your deal, like you can pull this off. And she's like dropping off the pan and slowly backing out of the kitchen. She's like, don't worry, you can pull this off. And then she like closes the door and I just hear her say like, somehow. And so I think this is the point that I kind of like looked around the kitchen and just a feeling of hopelessness washed over me, and I was like, I think the novelty of me making this really big dinner is going to be really worn off if he thinks I destroyed our house in the process. So somehow I pulled this off. I like somehow make this bechamel, which is like remedial kitchen stuff, and it took me like 3 attempts. And I dump it on top, and I put it in the oven, and it's rising, and I did not leave enough room for this to happen. And I'm sitting there with the light on in the oven, like cross-legged, like staring at this happening. And that's kind of how we came home. I was like sitting there cross-legged. There's a seemingly perfect moussaka on the stove. The kitchen is clean. The table is set, and I'm cross-legged, covered in sauce, crying, clutching this mostly empty bottle of red wine like it's my baby. And it's not the last time I cooked him dinner, but it's definitely the last time he asked me to. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jessica. That was also kind of terrifying. I'd never want to make that. So next up is Molly Barrio. Molly's a third-year student majoring in creative writing with a minor in French. She's worked at the Navigator on campus newspaper for 2 years as senior copy editor, and she loves dogs. Molly's interested in translating work and working in media. So help me welcome Molly.
So my family tends to follow my mom, and about 11 years ago we moved from Ontario to BC. And my family consists of my older brother, my older sister, me, and my little sister. And we moved to Ladysmith, which, if you don't know, is kind of on this hill, and it's about like, the most important part is this 6-block radius, and it's got these really great names of streets. So we moved there, and it's only